From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The president did say clearly at his press conference that waterboarding is torture. I say, therefore, it's against the law. And therefore, those who formulated the policy, at a minimum, should be held accountable.
Wisconsin Senator Russ Feingold on torture, state secrets, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, single-payer health care, and more. Then President Obama unveils his plan for an international tax overhaul.
It's a down payment on the larger tax reform we need to make our tax system simpler and fairer and more efficient for individuals and corporations.
We'll speak with The Nation magazine's William Greider. His new book is called Come Home, America. He asks, Obama told us to speak out, but is he listening? Then immigrant deportations have separated more than 1 million family members in the United States. We'll speak with a 12-year-old boy who has brought his case to Capitol Hill. His mother was deported to Mexico after trying to apply for permanent residency. She was banned from the U.S. for 10 to 20 years. Her 3 children are all U.S. citizens. They're in Washington to try to meet with the president to ask him to let their mother return. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama vowed Monday to overhaul tax policies that he said reward companies for shifting U.S. jobs overseas and that allow wealthy people to evade taxes using offshore accounts. Obama said the White House plan would save taxpayers $210 billion over the next decade.
And that's why today I'm announcing a set of proposals to crack down on illegal overseas tax evasion, close loopholes, and make it more profitable for companies to create jobs here in the United States. For years, we've talked about ending tax breaks for companies that ship jobs overseas and giving tax breaks to companies that create jobs here in America.
On Capitol Hill, House Democrats have rejected a request from President Obama for $80 million to close the U.S. prison camp at Guantanamo, Cuba. House Democrats removed the funding request from a $94 billion emergency spending bill to cover the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. House Appropriations Chair David Obey said the funding wasn't included because Obama has not yet outlined a concrete plan to close Guantanamo. In news from Pakistan, The Guardian reports the Taliban has seized control of Mingura, a main town in the Swat Valley, signaling the death knell for a fragile peace deal with the provincial government. Pakistani authorities are urging civilians to leave the region in a sign that a military attack on the Taliban in the Swat Valley may be imminent. For the last 2 weeks, Pakistani troops have been battling Taliban fighters in Buner and Lower Dir, 2 districts bordering Swat. Meanwhile, in Washington, Senator John Kerry, chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, has introduced legislation for tripling U.S. civilian aid to Pakistan to $7.5 billion over the next 5 years. On Monday, Admiral Mike Mullen, chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, officially designated the war in Afghanistan as the military's main effort, while acknowledging the fighting isn't over in Iraq. Mullen said, quote, "The main effort and our strategic focus from a military perspective must now shift to Afghanistan." But President Obama's plan to escalate the war in Afghanistan is continuing to come under criticism from within parts of his own party. In an interview with the American News Project, former senator and presidential candidate George McGovern said he's worried Afghanistan will become Obama's Vietnam.
I have a very deep concern about President Obama putting in another 21,000 troops into Afghanistan, and with the promise of more to come. I think if we continue to send troops in there, it could be the Vietnam of this present administration.
Senator Russ Feingold will weigh in after headlines. In other news from Afghanistan, human rights organizations are expressing alarm over Afghan President Hamid Karzai's decision to pick former warlord Mohammad Qasim Fahim to be his running mate. Brad Adams of Human Rights Watch said, quote, "To see Fahim back in the heart of the government would be a terrible step backwards for Afghanistan. He's one of the most notorious warlords in the country, with the blood of many Afghans on his hands from the Civil War." Fahim is still believed to be involved in many illegal activities, including running armed militias, as well as giving cover to criminal gangs and drug traffickers. The U.S. military is denying it's allowed soldiers to try to convert Afghans to Christianity following a report on Al Jazeera that showed pictures of soldiers with Bibles translated into Pashto and Dari. The military claimed the Bibles were never distributed to Afghans. Al Jazeera also aired footage of Lieutenant Colonel Gary Hensley, the chief of the U.S. military chaplains in Afghanistan, calling on soldiers to hunt people for Jesus.
The Special Forces guys, they hunt men, basically. We do the same thing as Christians. We hunt people for Jesus. We do. You hunt them down. Get the hound of heaven after them. So we get them in the kingdom, right? That's what we do. That's our business.
The Pentagon criticized Al Jazeera's report. Military spokesperson Colonel Greg Julian said, quote, "Most of this is taken out of context. This is irresponsible and inappropriate journalism." The Justice Department's investigating whether to prosecute 2 white Pennsylvania teenagers on civil rights statutes for their role in the fatal beating of Luis Ramirez, a Mexican immigrant in the town of Shenandoah. On Friday, an all-white jury exonerated the 2 teens of most serious charges in connection with the fatal beating. The Mexican-American Legal Defense and Education Fund condemned the jury's finding. Witnesses said 6 teenagers brutally beat Luis Ramirez last year while yelling racial slurs. When a friend of Ramirez tried to stop the beating, one of the teenagers said, "Tell your Mexican friends to get out of this town or you'll be laying next to him." In news from Capitol Hill, Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama has been named the ranking Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee, replacing Arlen Specter, who switched to the Democratic Party last week. Sessions will play a key role in the upcoming confirmation hearings for President Obama's eventual nominee for the Supreme Court. Sessions is a staunch conservative who once described the NAACP and American Civil Liberties Union as un-American and communist-inspired because they, quote, force civil rights down the throats of people. The Wall Street Journal reports the Obama administration is expected to direct about 10 of the 19 banks undergoing government stress tests to boost their capital. The exact number of banks affected remains under discussion. It could include Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citigroup, and several regional banks. The Supreme Court's ruled undocumented workers using false papers cannot be charged with aggravated identity theft unless they knew their fake IDs belonged to a real person. The Bush administration frequently charged undocumented immigrants with felony identity theft, which carries a 2-year sentence. Prosecutors had used the threat of a felony to persuade undocumented workers to plead guilty to lesser charges of document fraud. A Louisiana state board's been sued for failing to investigate possible professional and ethical violations committed by Larry James, who served as the chief psychologist at Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib. The lawsuit alleges that James, a retired Army colonel, helped design and implement the Bush administration's harsh interrogation programs. Larry James is a licensed psychologist in Louisiana. He's now the dean of Wright State University's School of Professional Psychology in Dayton, Ohio. The lawsuit against the Louisiana State Board of Examiners of Psychologists was filed by an Ohio-based psychologist named Trudy Bond. The Pentagon's top auditor said the military contractor KBR constituted the vast majority of 32 cases of suspected combat zone fraud referred by government auditors for criminal investigation. KBR is a former subsidiary of Halliburton and is the Army's largest contractor in Iraq and Afghanistan. Meanwhile, questions are being raised about no-bid Pentagon contracts given to a nephew of Democrat John Murtha, the chair of the House Appropriations Defense Subcommittee. The Washington Post reports Robert Murtha received $4 million in Pentagon contracts last year, all without competitive bidding. The Center for American Progress is estimating 2.4 million workers have lost the health coverage their jobs provided since the start of the recession. More than 320,000 Americans lost their employer-provided health insurance in March alone. This amounts to over 10,000 workers a day. Members of the peace group CodePink disrupted Israeli President Shimon Peres's speech Monday at the annual American-Israeli Political Action Committee Policy Conference in Washington. Members of the group raised banners, "Want Peace, End the Occupation," and "What About Gaza?" as well as "No Money for War Crimes. In media news, the New York Times Company has postponed its threat to start the process of closing the Boston Globe after wringing major concessions from all but one of the Globe's labor unions. And the prominent Cuban musician Silvio Rodriguez has criticized the Obama administration after the State Department blocked his entry into the United States to perform at Sunday's 90th birthday celebration of Pete Seeger. Rodriguez said, quote, "As a worker for Cuban culture, I still feel as blockaded and discriminated against as I do by other administrations, and I truly hope that changes someday." And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.